Yes. It is here, ladies and gentlemen. The NFL draft is right around the corner, and Philadelphia is in such a unique position to completely revamp their whole roster from last season to now. Having the offseason that Howie Roseman has had, addressing a lot of the holes on the defensive side of the ball with guys like Devin White, Bryce Huff, trading Hassan Reddick, bringing back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, right? Bringing in Saquon Barkley on the offensive side of the ball. It's just a very unique situation in Philadelphia, going from what was one of the worst defenses I've seen in Philadelphia in quite some time, maybe the worst I've ever seen in my football life, to now all of a sudden people believing that this is going to be a top unit because of the new coaching hire, with some of the signings that we have, and potentially what we could do in the draft moving forward. Now, I don't believe we're going to be a top unit quite yet. I don't even believe we're going to be a top 20 unit. We were pretty low last year in terms of our play. We were a really bad unit. Does that not mean we can't be respectable? And I guess respectable would be, I don't know, maybe a little bit below 20th in the NFL to a degree. Even then, I don't know if that's respectable, but it would certainly be better than last season. And coaching by Vic Fangio, just him alone is going to make this defense better. I understand that, but you need some players. And the NFL draft for us, for Philadelphia, is a really unique opportunity to go ahead and address those things. And there are some rumors regarding the draft right now that Philadelphia is going to go in a different direction in terms of pick 22 by going after offensive tackle, addressing something on the offensive side of the ball, getting some depth there, right? That's most likely what they're going to do, and I'm not going to be upset by the pick if they get a guy like, Tyler Guyton, if they get Troy Fotuanu, if they get a young, raw offensive tackle who's eventually going to replace Lane Johnson in a few years. And again, when you take a raw prospect at offensive tackle, you're going to bring him through Stoutland University, and we know the development process that happens there. So again, if 22 they decide to go offensive tackle, I'm not going to be upset by it. However, for me, I try to think a little bit differently in terms of addressing this roster. So the draft picks that I'm going to mention in today's episode are solely based on my opinion and my opinion alone. I'm not looking at anybody and reporting any inside information because I'm none of those things. As you can tell, I record this in my damn basement. I have pictures of the same Philadelphia Eagles logos behind me. I'm just a normal dude. I'm a fan who likes to talk about the sport. I'm a fan who likes to talk about the team. And as a fan, I didn't even introduce myself. My name's Asif Badi. It's the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast, and we're talking about the NFL draft. Okay, so let's go into it. Let's talk about what Philadelphia can do with at least their first 2 to 3 picks to address the defensive side of the ball, and why those picks that I'm going to suggest is going to help Philadelphia in the long run here, okay? Let's talk about the idea that Philadelphia could potentially draft a defensive back, and that's because Isaiah Rodgers has not been reinstated by the NFL due to his gambling scenario situation. A little bit of a tough gig, but I'm sure if Isaiah Rodgers were reinstated and he was on the roster actively and there were no issues, you would hear me really say we're definitely 100% going offensive tackle. But there is a little bit of nuance here because he's not reinstated by the NFL, so he's not necessarily going to be able to play just yet. So the potential of drafting a cornerback at pick 22 in the first round is a high possibility. And again, I'm not really big into mock drafts and big into doing mock drafts, but I ran through a few myself. I did a couple myself just to kind of have an idea of what certain teams or certain people may be thinking about what teams are going to do, just to have an idea. And assuming we don't trade up from pick 22 and we stay pat, there's a couple of players at that pick that generally are available. Guys like Cooper Dejean's generally available. Kool-Aid McKinstry, Nate Wiggins are generally available. Guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold, who are really, really, I think, the top of the class here. Quinyon Mitchell, for example, is just, to me, the best cornerback prospect in this draft, despite the fact that he went to Toledo. His ball skills, his ability to cover, the speed that he has. He's the same size as Devin Witherspoon. He's a willing tackler. And honestly, his ability to just make up ground and play the ball in the air is really, 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 really good stuff to watch on film. Which is why I don't believe Quinyon Mitchell is going to be available for us at 22. And in order to get a guy like that, you probably have to trade up in the draft. Now, some people may want to trade up in the draft and get a high-quality player like Mitchell, and I wouldn't mind that. But if we have so many holes on the defensive side of the ball, I would much rather try to just plug in as many of them as I can with the draft picks that I have, as opposed to giving them all the way, as opposed to giving those assets up to trade up for a guy like Mitchell. Same deal with Arnold, right? At 22, people say guys like Cooper Dejean would be available. Guys like Kool-Aid McKinstry and Nate Wiggins would be available. For me, the ideal pick at pick 22 would be Nate Wiggins. Now, people like Cooper Dejean in Philadelphia just because of the style of play he had in college. That really like off zone, kind of like vertical attacking corner. I don't know of another way to describe it. Because I mentioned in videos past about Cooper Dejean versus Nate Wiggins, why I would pick one of them. I'll put the link in the video up there and in the description if you want to take a look at it. But really, it's just going to be in the cards up here. Click on it. It'll take you to that video. I talked about how Cooper Dejean, to me, is a good player, but I feel like he only fits certain schemes. Nate Wiggins is a little bit more malleable in terms of where you could play him, in terms of like playing man, playing zone, playing like zone blitz schemes, playing like 1/3 deep thirds of the field. Right? Like, I think Nate Wiggins can just do more as an NFL cornerback, especially in today's NFL, with his speed, with his athleticism, with his fluidity as an athlete. Nate Wiggins, to me, outside of Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold, is actually the best cornerback prospect in the draft. So at pick 22, if I'm Philadelphia and he's on the board, I'm picking up the phone and that's who I'm calling to get the draft rights to. Because then all of a sudden, once Darius Slay and James Bradbury leave, you're going to have a roster that's got Isaiah Rodgers, Nate Wiggins, Keely Ringo, Eli Ricks. It's a pretty damn good young secondary right there, because Keely Ringo showed some flashes. Eli Rick had some moments, right? So it would be a young, nice core with the tutelage of a Vic Fangio and the coaching staff that he's developed there on the defensive side of the ball. I think that would be a really, really good way to just solidify the back four, at least for years to come. Okay. Which now brings me on to my next suggestion here, and that's at pick 50. Okay. At pick 50, I mentioned that I did a lot of drafts, and the name that keeps coming up, which is beyond me for some reason, is Edgerrin Cooper. He always seems to fall in the second round to pick number 50. Now, again, it could just be that a lot of teams are not looking to draft linebacker higher in the draft, or they have solidified linebackers and it's not necessarily a need. Philadelphia, however, really could use a linebacker. And they could really use a guy who, while may not necessarily be the best guy in coverage, again, in Vic Fangio schemes, you're not asked a lot to just drop back and cover per se. You're more asked to kind of play the middle of the field and be able to be a blitzing linebacker. And Edgerrin Cooper, with his size, with his ability, his speed, could be a pretty damn good blitzing linebacker and would immediately make an impact for Philadelphia, especially considering right now we're rolling with Devin White and Nakobe Dean as our starters. And I don't know about you, I like Nakobe Dean, but his injury history, unfortunately, has made him a liability out there on the field, and we don't know what to expect from him. And even when he is on the field, we haven't seen him shown a great ability to cover players, at least in pass coverage, right? So if my first pick is Nate Wiggins, my next pick should address the level of defense beneath the back four, and that's linebacker. Edgerrin Cooper would be the guy that I would pick at number 50 because his size, physicality, athleticism, all would fit with Vic Fangio. Blitzing A-gap linebackers, being able to just play the run hard, and, you have Devin White with you in conjunction to Edgerrin Cooper and Nakobe Dean. It's a decent linebacking core. It really is like a pretty good group of guys to have, especially when two of them are in the process of trying to play on like a prove-it year, and then you got rookie who's going to be hungry. To me, Edgerrin Cooper at 50 is the ideal pick. Which now brings me to the last and final pick of Philadelphia in the second round, and probably the last pick that I'm going to cover because, quite frankly, I'd be lying to everybody here if I said I knew anybody past the second round. I'm not a big, huge draft buff. I don't really go into the details of draft day until it comes up, and I kind of look at what Philadelphia did after the fact. To me, I just find it more interesting that way because then they've done their tutelage, they've done their due diligence. Rather, they've went through all the interviews, they spoke to everybody that they needed to speak to, and then they made a decision. And then it's up to us to kind of look into it and see whether or not these guys can play. So I sidetracked a little bit, but let's get back to it. Number 53. Again, I think this team has a lot of holes on defense, and a lot of it has to do with depth, the linebacking core, which we addressed with Edgerrin Cooper, hopefully. Let me say it like this. In the first round, people thought Cooper Dejean would be a Philadelphia Eagle due to his versatility. His ability to play cornerback and safety would be a really ideal mix for what Fangio wants to do. Similar to Malcolm Jenkins, in the sense that, like, you can kind of play him all over the field. You can play him on all three levels. He could blitz, he can cover, he could drop back deep at safety. You could put him in corner, right? Cooper Dejean kind of represents that same skill set, even though I don't necessarily believe in the athleticism as much as I do a guy like Nate Wiggins. I say all that to say this, though. If I took a cornerback and I took a linebacker at 22 and 50, at 53, I would rather just get a dog. Pun intended here. I would get Javon Bullard, the safety from Georgia. And this dude, when you watch him play, think of Sidney Brown and the dynamo that he is. But oh, good. Look at me hitting the microphone, but reined in a little bit. A more controlled and calculated Sidney Brown. And again, not that Sidney Brown was a bad player. He's just a little erratic in terms of his ability to tackle, right? Javon Bullard, to me, a really polished safety for such a young player. And a dog literally and figuratively on the field. His ability to tackle, to close in, his foot speed. You watch him on film and you're saying to yourself, well, damn, he would fit in Philadelphia like a glove and just fit the vibe of what we're trying to bring back in Philadelphia on the defensive side of the ball. That tenacity, that ferociousness, that aggressiveness. He has that in spades. And then once you draft him, you got to look at the whole defensive lineup now. All of a sudden, you got obviously Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith on the edge with Carter, Davis, Milton Williams on the interior. Then at the next level, with the second pick, you drafted Edgerrin Cooper so that you have now Devin White, Nakobe Dean, and Edgerrin Cooper. And most likely Cooper and White would be your starters if we decide to draft those two. And then lastly, you look on the back four. With our first two picks, we took, Nate Wiggins, and then pick number 53, our third pick rather, went to Javon Bullard. We signed Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You got Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown on the roster. You have Keely Ringo. You got Eli Ricks. You have Isaiah Rodgers when he gets reinstated. And it's a nice young group of defensive backs, especially when a guy like James Bradbury is virtually done and Darius Slay, his time in Philadelphia will almost be done by the time these guys are polished and ready to play true quality football for Philadelphia. So just as depth pieces, just as guys to fill out the rest of the roster on the defensive side of the ball, to me, my first three picks for the Eagles should just go after defensive players because it was one of the worst defenses I can ever remember seeing as an Eagles fan and one of the worst defenses I've seen in quite some time. So, what say you? Let me know what you think in the comments section below regarding some of the picks that I have. If you believe that players that I mentioned are valued too high or too low, or you think I'm missing somebody, I would love to hear your opinion in the comments section below. And I would also just appreciate you guys for giving me, just for giving me a little bit. I'm a little under the weather right now. It's like 4 a.m. I couldn't fall asleep. So I decided to record an episode. So forgive me if I sound a little bit on the tired and, frail side of things, if you will. But I wanted to get this episode out because I feel like it's important for us to understand that Philadelphia really needs help on the defensive side of the ball. And as much as we want to build depth on the offensive line and get players on the offensive side of the ball to help us get this offense rolling, it's not going to mean anything if we don't have true players on the defensive side of the ball because you need more athletes. We need bigger names. I'm tired of relying on a guy like James Bradbury at this point. The guy looks done, doesn't want to play. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, yes, we're bringing him back, but he's also a little bit unconventional as a safety. Reed Blankenship is just average. Sidney Brown is a little erratic. And again, coaching will rein him in a little bit, but again, a dynamo, just a little bit out of control. And Devin White's on a prove-it-year deal, right? So, like, you might get good ball for him, but then he might get paid somewhere else, and then all of a sudden, what are you going to do at linebacker? So, having a guy like Edgerrin Cooper at least just give you a little bit of security, a little bit of a safety blanket, knowing that guy's there. So, that's all I got in terms of covering the draft, man. I'm not going to go too crazy into it. I'll give more my reaction to the draft after it's done on Thursday because I feel like trying to get a gauge on what Howie and the Eagles are thinking and what other teams are thinking about. They're doing so much more due diligence and due diligence. Jeez Louise. More due diligence than I could even have access to. I can look up players on the internet, but like they're speaking to their coaches, they're going to the facilities, they're watching them, they're actually meeting other people who hang out with them. A lot more nuance goes into the draft than meets the eye, and that I don't have any pertinent information or access to, so I can't sit here and project anything that they're going to do and until after it happens. So I'm not even going to bother with it. So those are my 3 ideal picks. Round 1 would be Nate Wiggins. Round 2, pick 50 would be Edgerrin Cooper. Round 2, pick 53, Javon Bullard. Let me know if you agree in the comments section below. Like I said, I would love to hear your thoughts. And hopefully, Howie Roseman in Philadelphia are ready to attack this draft, because if we nail it, all of a sudden, Philadelphia is really cooking with some fire. Hey, you got through a full episode of the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. Thank you for watching. If you want to support the channel, hit the like and subscribe button below. You can also check us out on Instagram at the Riding the Bench podcast with a K instead of C in the word podcast. And also check us out on audio platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're on there. All of that is in the description below. Please come back next time for the Riding the Bench Eagles podcast. Thanks for listening.